My Furby was the best friend I ever had. I got her for Christmas one year when I was in middle school. We didn't have a lot of money to spend on toys, but I begged and begged every day until they caved. I was ecstatic. It was really hard for me to make friends as a kid, and that's the whole reason I wanted a Furby. Mine was named Mimi. I desperately needed a friend, especially at school. All the other kids bullied me a lot, so I sat alone at lunch every day. Things changed once I had Mimi. I took her to school in my backpack so I could put her on the table during lunchtime and eat with her.
Mamadou, kabobe. Yay, kamate, dailo ote.
I'm sorry, Mimi. I know it's dark in there, but I would miss you all day if I left you at home.
Lots of kids took their new toys to school after we got back from Christmas break. I guess it was okay for all of them to show off their new toys, but not me. I might have finally found a friend, but all my old bullies were still around.
Hey, look, she's talking to a toy. What are you, crazy? You know this thing isn't real, right?
Shut up. Mimi's my friend. You wouldn't understand.
Your friend? Wow, you have a name for it and everything. You must really care about her, right?
Yes, I do.
Then you would hate if I did this.
Those mean boys took Mimi and started throwing her around to each other. They were laughing, but all I could hear was Mimi crying.
Buke taboku, karababoba, karababoba.
Stop it! You're gonna hurt her! Please, stop!
Boo-hoo, my stupid toy is gonna get broken.
I said stop it!
I did what I had to do to protect my only friend. They thought I was a wimp, but that day I became dangerous. I jumped right on top of that stupid jerk and started clawing the skin right off his face.
Ah! Help me! Get her off of me!
If I hadn't been pulled off of him, I would have been able to rip his eyes out. He had deep cuts all over his face that probably left nasty scars. I hope they did, but unfortunately, I never got to find out. Even though my actions were justified, I got suspended from school for 10 days as they debated expelling me. But what upset me more was the fact that my mom took my Furby away from me. She said it was causing problems, that I couldn't just make friends with a robot and not talk to anybody else. But it's not my fault that Mimi treated me better than anyone else ever did. My mom hid Mimi on top of the big bookshelf in her room and said I could have her back when I started to behave. Of course, I wasn't going to wait that long to see her again. At night, I snuck into my mom's room and climbed up the bookshelf as quietly as possible. Then I grabbed Mimi and snuck back into my room.
I missed you so much, Mimi. I told you I'd get you back.
Kamemeone.
Mimi, what's wrong? Why aren't you saying anything?
Betty, is that you?
Mimi, you can talk.
Of course I can talk. I love you, Betty. Why did they take you away from me?
I don't know. They hate me.
So it's true. Nobody really loves you, do they?
No, they don't.
But I love you, Betty.
Do you really mean that?
I do, Betty, and I can prove it. Let's make sure nobody ever comes between us again.
That sounds wonderful. But how?
Listen carefully, Betty.
Mimi told me the plan she hatched. The most important thing was to make sure I put Mimi back in the exact same spot every night so my mom wouldn't notice anything. At night, Mimi and I would talk and catch up and have our tea parties, except there was always one extra chore we had to do together. Mimi showed me what to get out from the cabinet underneath the sink and what stuff in the pantry I should put it in. We did this every night for a week. In the morning, I had to go without my Furby, but I spent the whole day fighting to get her back. She told me that I had to refuse to eat anything my parents gave me that was made in the house. No matter what they did, I had to demand that I would not eat until Mimi was returned to me. And if they still refused, I would only accept chicken nuggets from McDonald's. My parents caved in a few times and got me nuggets, but then they said it was getting too expensive and I had to come off my hunger strike or I would starve. I was in really bad condition. Going hungry is terrible, but my parents, who were eating food from the house, were much worse off. They looked sicker and sicker with each passing day, until they could barely stand up and say enough words to tell me what to do. Finally, one morning, as they were trying to shove cereal down my throat, they collapsed. Right away, I ran to Mimi.
Mimi, you were right! That box that said rat poison worked great. They're sleeping forever now. It's just you and me.
Hooray! Let's play!
At last, Mimi and I could be together without anyone trying to tear us apart. Mimi showed me some food that was safe to eat. And for the next 3 days, we lived our most perfect possible lives together. We had the whole house to ourselves while Mom and Dad rotted on the kitchen floor. Unfortunately, the neighbors came looking on the 3rd day and found us out. Sadly, once they threw me in juvie, I never saw Mimi again. I lived in foster care until my 18th birthday, which was a month ago. Now I have my own money, and I can buy my own Furby. I think I'll call this one Mimi 2. When we were younger, in the late 1990s, my brother and I shared a room and had Furbies. Furbish, our new robot friend, caught our attention at first because of its large expressive eyes and ability to speak its own language. However, the novelty of the Furby eventually wore off, and it was relegated to the back of our disorganized toy shelf. We removed the batteries to save energy, but we also did it to prevent the device from unannounced turning on and chattering away in the middle of the night. We had no idea that choosing to silence Furby would lead to a terrifying incident. After a few months, the Furby was no more than another forgotten childhood memory. Action figures, video game posters, and a hazy nightlight could all be found in our room, which served as a haven. In the soft, cozy darkness of our room, my brother and I had grown accustomed to sharing stories and stealing one another's secrets. On one of these typical nights, the bizarre events began. The room was buzzing with whispers as we slept in our beds. School, our preferred cartoons, and the mysteries that captivated our young minds were all topics of conversation between my brother and I. With the exception of the occasional creak of the floorboards and the distant hum of the refrigerator, the only sound in the space was the soft murmur of our voices. Next, a voice abruptly interrupted the quiet night. It was a voice that gave us the chills and made the blood in our veins freeze. Furby had been silent until now, but we knew we heard him speaking. Its voice was mechanized, unsettling, and seemed to be filled with an unnatural joy. It prompted,
Would you like to play?
I was scared, and so was my brother. The room appeared to grow colder as the air grew heavy with an enigmatic presence. With the batteries out, the Furby was supposed to be inactive. But there it was, speaking in its unsettling voice. It asked again, each time making the next question more unsettling than the previous.
Do you want to play?
My brother finally broke the awkward silence. You hear that, right? As I continued to stare at the Furby, I couldn't help but nod. I did, without a doubt. The internal struggle between fear and curiosity compelled us to look into it. We moved cautiously toward the Furby while our hearts were thumping. When we checked it, the battery compartment was empty. My brother carefully picked up the Furby and gave it a quick look.
Maybe it's some kind of glitch?
He said, but the fear in his eyes made his attempt at logic obvious. As he turned it over in his hands, the Furby abruptly uttered another word, this time sounding slightly more urgent. Come closer. My brother dropped the Furby as if it burned him, and in our haste to get away, we both stumbled back, tripping over one another. No way, I uttered in a whisper that was barely audible. This isn't possible. Once more in a state of panic, we met eyes and looked for a solution. The Furby stayed put, its plastic eyes seeming to be fixed on us. What do we do? My brother questioned. After inhaling deeply, I quickly swallowed. I don't know. Maybe we should just throw it away. The two of us grabbed it off the ground with our trembling hands without thinking. We hastily left our room and went into the kitchen, where we threw the cursed toy into the trash. Even after we closed the lid and fell asleep, the eerie voice of the Furby echoed in our ears. We tried to ignore the voice coming from the kitchen as we hid under our covers with beads of sweat on our foreheads. The Furby appeared to be calling out to us, pleading for our attention. The night felt endless, filled with fear and uncertainty. We couldn't sleep a wink. Eventually, as exhaustion overcame our fear, we fell into a restless sleep. The next morning when we awoke, the Furby was no longer in the trash can. We looked everywhere, but there was no sign of it. We never saw it again, and we never figured out what had given it life that night. My brother and I are still unsure if we actually heard it or if it was all in our heads. But one thing is certain. We still have nightmares about the time the Furby asked us to play, serving as a constant reminder that some childhood toys are better left in the past.
Have you ever had any hobbies? Mine was being a Furbies collector. I inherited this from my parents. They always collected Furbies. When they left this world at a young age, I was left with their collection, and as a way of remembering them, I set out to complete it. I never thought that my little hobby would put my life at risk and make me see something that no human being should ever see. I remember back in the day I used to spend all afternoon on Amazon or Wish looking for Furbies. That day, I found a pink Furby in the window of an antique store and immediately went to buy it. The owner of the place was a rather strange man, but what antique store owner wasn't, right? Besides, the pink Furby was beautiful, one of the prettiest I had ever seen. I was on my way home when I came across a garage sale, and that's when, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. On a table was a black Furby with red eyes. Its face looked distorted, and its hair was in an intentionally bad state. I had seen black Furbies before, but never one like this. It looked like it had come out of a child's nightmare. I got out of the car and immediately grabbed it and took it to the owner, a goth girl who seemed nice. I bought it from her at a fairly low price, but before I left, the girl spoke to me from behind.
Hey, take care of Irving, will you?
Oh? Does it have a name?
Yes, it was my grandmother's, but I gave it a makeover. It was with me all my childhood, but I'm going to college and I won't take it with me.
Don't worry, I promise to take care of it. With Furby in the car, I drove home. Once I arrived, I inspected it from top to bottom. I know that girl was very fond of it, but there was something that made me feel uncomfortable, as if something in its look was wrong. I had already collected too many Furbies, maybe it was time to move on to something else. I left the pink Furby in the display case with my other Furbies and the black one in the dining room. I went to take a nap, then I would think about where to place it. When I woke up, it seemed to be night. All the lights were off, so I turned on the light on my bedside table to illuminate my room. But when I turned it on, there it was. The black Furby was on my bedside table next to the lamp. How can it be? I'm sure I left it in the dining room. Nervously, I grabbed it and took it back to the dining room. I was always a person who believed in energies and the paranormal, and that Furbies had something wrong with it. I thought about throwing it away, but then I remembered that the girl had said it had sentimental value, and I didn't feel like she was a bad person. Maybe I was overreacting and judging it for something that may have been my confusion. For the next few hours, I stayed there, eating and watching a TV show. But every now and then, I kept an eye on the Furby. It was still there, in the same place. A few hours later, I was going to sleep. I made sure the doors were locked and all the lights were off. I was about to go to bed, but before I did, I got a little thirsty, so I went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. I was pouring some water in the glass when I heard something behind me. There was nothing. I went to check the Furby again, but it was still there. I think I'm being too paranoid. I went back to the kitchen to get the bottle of water, and there it was. The Furby was right next to the water bottle. I turned around to see it in the dining room, but it was gone. No, this is impossible. It was there a second ago. I turned around again, and the Furby was gone. This has to be a dream. This can't be happening. The kitchen light started to turn on and off. Every time it was off, I saw shadows running. They were all running back and forth. I fell to the floor terrified, frozen with fear, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, all the shadows became quiet. No, they were moving. They were coming towards me. The dishes and cutlery from the kitchen were flying everywhere. The refrigerator door was opening and closing. It was as if hell itself had broken loose in my kitchen. Suddenly, the lights went out and silence took over the place. Ah! At that moment, I thought of nothing else. threw the Furby, and ran out of the house as fast as I could. I didn't care about leaving it open. I didn't care about being in my pajamas. I didn't care about anything. I just ran as fast as I could without looking back. I stayed in a square near my house all night. I didn't want to go back, but I knew I had to. As soon as it was morning, I got back to my house before people started to leave for work. Once I got home, I was devastated. My Furby's collection was scattered all over the house. All the furniture was broken or cracked, and all the faucets were open. The only thing that remained intact was the kitchen table, and on top of it was the Furby facing my direction. In an act of bravery, I grabbed the Furby, put it in a box, and threw it in the house where the garage sale was held. It was no longer my problem. Once home, I fixed all the wreckage and relaxed in bed. I never saw the Furby again, but I'm afraid that wasn't the last day that strange things happened in my house. When I sleep, I hear the furniture move by itself. Sometimes things are not where I put them, and at night, I hear little footsteps all over the house. Every time I go to see if anyone is in my house, there's no one there. Next week, I'm moving out. The only thing I wish is that when I leave the house, whatever is haunting me will stop.